Good evening, my listening friends. Once again, it's the DeFi Collective with Robert Vaughn and Alex Jewell. You can reach us on the DeFi Collective at gmail.com. We're on YouTube. We also live stream on Facebook. So please like and subscribe on YouTube. You can find us at the DeFi Collective or Let's Talk Radio with a Y, RADYO. You can find us on either one of those channels. So today we have I think, a relevant show. We're going to talk about the intersection of neoliberalism and decentralized finance. And if you think you're confused, just stick around because Alex is going to break it down for you. So, Alex, neoliberalism, what the hell is that?
Well, neoliberalism is something that has become almost like an insult for leftists to use. Again, like the moment you disagree with another person left of center, you're like, you're just a liberal, you're just a neoliberal, right? But at the end of the day, what neoliberalism is just like a specific packaging of the existing free market economic system that we have, in a way that feels more palatable, perhaps, to somebody who identifies more as liberal, right? So, like, it's this idea that they're already comfortable enough that they don't necessarily want to actually change the system. They just want to feel like the system is getting better and like feel like there's cultural change, kind of feel like there's progress happening. And they are okay with the existing more conservative free market economic system that they think can be used to create those things, right? Perhaps with less government oversight, perhaps with less regulation. It's not to the point of libertarianism, right? They do think that something should be created under regulation, that regulation can be used to protect people, but they're definitely not fans of getting in the way of what they think gives freedom, right? Which is what is through free market economics. So it's sort of this it's almost like centrism, really, when you look at it on the spectrum. It's this idea that we don't have to change the economic system that's created inequity, that we can continue to produce some sort of idea of progress with cultural shifts along with the existing economic framework.
Okay. And just a little historical perspective on, I guess, classical or traditional economic theory. From about 1915 to probably the late 70s, theory was basically governed by the thought, what they call Keynesian economics. John Maynard Keynes, who was an English economist, felt that the government should get involved in the market by increasing or decreasing the money supply to, I guess, manipulate aggregate demand so they could take care of things like curb unemployment, so they could take care of things like increase worker representation in unions. These were all Keynesian economic theories. And it sort of perk up the economy. It was okay for the government to, buy bonds and inject money into the money supply, M1, and that would increase aggregate demand. So more people would have more money, they would buy things, and that would kind of speed the economy up. And of course, when it got too fast, then they would increase the interest rates and slow it down a little bit. Okay, now what happened? I guess in the late 70s, early 80s, Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher decided, you know what, we don't like that theory anymore. There's a guy named Arthur Lafler, who we think him and Milton Friedman make more sense. And what Arthur Lafler's big thing was, he said, well, if you cut taxes on corporations, corporate tax at that time was about 40%, the top rate, 40 to 50%, I think it was. And he said, well, if you cut taxes, there'll be more money and that will speed the economy up. And the money that the corporations make, the additional money would trickle down. Of course, it never trickled down. It trickled into stock buybacks and bonuses and things of that nature. So Reagan and Margaret Thatcher kind of felt like, we needed to get the government out of everything. First of all, we got to get rid of that union, that air traffic controllers union. Once we do that, and after that, it was kind of like okay, well, we're gonna get the government out. So what happened was, Democrats were always, at that time, were considered the party of the people, so to speak. And they said, well, we got to take care of the people. But what happened was the Democrats couldn't get elected unless they kind of adopted some of these ideas, and then so you had Bill Clinton with the free trade agreements, and I know neoliberalism also is defined as unrestricted global free market capitalism, and that's what
Yeah.
that was. Anytime you have a free trade zone or a free trade agreement, that's unrestricted capitalism, and
Yeah.
it's kind of funny because that's the same thing that the Democrats were criticizing the Republicans for. and here they are, doing the same thing and even doing it more and doing it better,
Yeah.
so I think it's kind of neoliberalism in a strange sort of way. It's decentralized economy, is decentralized, but the contradiction is that in a capitalistic system, you can't really be decentralized. There are always going to be banks,
Yeah.
central monetary funds, and things of that nature. In a decentralized economy, that's when you can be decentralized. So it doesn't matter if it's like somebody said the other day, says, well, tell me the difference between a Democrat and a Republican. I said, I don't know. He said, you spell one with a D and one with an R. I said, okay.
Yeah, right. One party pretends to care about cultural issues, and the other thinks that we need to take cultural issues back 100 years, right? But
That's right. Yeah.
yeah,
And one of the things about neoliberalism is that it exacerbates existing social issues because it creates much more of a wealth gap. Because what neoliberalism is basically is, you let the multinational companies run everything. And so what happens is that when you have this global free market, you have people. They always call the Russians oligarchs, and in this country we call them billionaires. Well, I'm going to tell you, they're the same guy. Okay, they own companies worldwide in different countries, and they're not really beholden to a particular country like they used to be. Like they say
yep,
buy American, buy American. Well, General Motors sells more cars in China than it does in America. The
yep,
number one car in China, number one car is a Cadillac, and the second most popular non-Chinese car is a Buick. So they sell more cars over there than they do here. And I think what happens is that when you have this globalization, then there is less. It all boils down to how can you make the most money, and it's
yep,
not right, for somebody to move to China and says, well, I can remember when I worked at a large auto manufacturer. We were making, everybody there was making good money, what we consider good money. But they had a plant in Mexico, where they were making in a month what we made in an hour.
yeah,
And I was like, man, this is really crazy. So, a lot of the jobs went to Mexico because the company had no allegiance to Detroit or Cleveland or New York or Baltimore. They had plants, the manufacturing plants were all over, but they had no allegiance to these places anymore. If they could pay someone for a whole month's work, what they're paying you for 1 hour, the prevailing thought, and this is why I think with neoliberalism taking off, I think this is why a lot of our jobs evaporated overseas. I mean, because
yeah,
I can remember when I got out of high school, you could go. I know I said, well, I'm going to get a job this summer before I go to college. So I went to Ford, I went to Alcoa, I went to J&L Steel, and I went to one other company. But anyway, Ford said, well, come back Monday and you can start. And J&L Steel said, I tell you what, get a good night's sleep, be here at 7 o'clock in the morning. And Alcoa said, this is Fred. Go with him. Have you eaten yet? I said, no. He says, get him a sandwich. Here's some clothes. This is like 10 o'clock in the morning. He says, go with Fred. He'll show you what to do. and you start on the payroll right now, so you better get to work. I mean, that's how easy it was to get. And these were good jobs. I mean,
Yeah.
these were paying prevailing wages, union, and these were good jobs. And all those jobs, one of the main reasons they went overseas was because of neoliberal philosophy. And
Right.
when you had this globalization, they said, well, why am I going to pay him? I can hire 40 people for the price I'm paying you. So I'm going to hire you. Yeah, now granted, they're in China or Thailand or someplace, but I can pay them and I know for a fact, people in Mexico were making in a month what we made in 1 hour. And that's just, I mean, it's crazy, man, but that's where all the jobs went. So
Yeah.
Alex, DeFi, how does DeFi address some of this? Let's see if we can't figure this out.
Well, I
Decentralized
think
finance.
when we look at all the variables here, one is obviously globalism, and the reality is that we're not becoming less global, right? We're not um, moving towards being isolated nations again and tribal. Like the reality is that we're becoming more global of an economy, and the internet has allowed us to do that. But of course, like you mentioned, we've run into serious issues in terms of how that's carried out with how our current economic system works, where the Western influence of the free market economics that were already inequitable here have created systems of inequity elsewhere, right? And we see this, for example, you look at a sort of a microcosm of capitalistic dystopia like South Korea, where you have a company like Samsung and you have this ruling class called the Chaebol, and the Chaebol is this ruling class of billionaires in South Korea. And then everybody else, if they're lucky, get to be a worker, right? The people who get lucky to work at a company like Samsung or Hyundai or some, one of the like 5 companies that they have the opportunity twice a year to get a job at. If they get to work there, they're still exposed to cancer causing chemicals. They're still exposed to poor working conditions and things like that, even with maybe fairer pay and benefits than everybody else in the country who ends up in a really even lower working class or farmer, right? And this is the beautiful capitalistic system that we gifted them. And so what you see is that when things play out in sort of smaller environments and maybe in a faster pace, we see that it doesn't like go nicely. Like it doesn't, the trajectory of capitalism, free market economics, at least the trajectory is the worker and the work. You want sort of as a company to spend less and make more, right? So what does that mean? Well, that means that you're not moving in favor of the worker, right? You're not moving towards paying workers more. You're working towards how can I make workers disposable or even replace them? And you're working towards how can I get less quality materials? How can I get less regulation, right? And so when all of these things play out, eventually you work your way with enough money into government influence, right? This has happened in South Korea too. You work into government influence so that you can continue to make the rules about yourself. And so where does DeFi play into that? DeFi plays into that because instead of us continuing down this trajectory of dystopia, where you end up with almost no working class at all, in fact, you just end up with a ruling class. Everybody has their chaebol, and then you end up with everybody else who's just sort of now in this weird digital feudalism where we're all at the mercy of some tech giants. And what DeFi allows us to do is, as this dystopian trajectory plays out, we can reverse that, right? And not reverse it in a way where we go backwards. We can create something that's new. We can reset, right? And I think that's why DeFi is so important. It's not a reversal, it's a reset. And when you reset, you can redesign the components that didn't work before. You can learn from it. And so we can take some of the things perhaps from capitalism that were pretty nice, like being able to execute an idea that you have, right? Being able to spend time creating, being able to spend time innovating and competing, right? These are great aspects of capitalism that worked earlier on, that as capitalism played out, it it didn't promise as well. It's hard to compete when things are monopolized, right? It's hard to innovate when things are monopolized. It's hard to collaborate when everybody has a patent on a piece of the puzzle and they won't share it with each other. So how do we create an economy that has the benefits from things that we've learned, but create something new for the global digital economy that's the reality that we're continuing to move further into? And I think where you have decentralization play a big part is where all of us then take ownership again as workers or users of this economy. We all take ownership over our own data. We take ownership over our own decisions. And then we contribute back to something that we all share. And everybody is able to benefit from that as an equal participant in a really democratized sense, right? And it means that there is exchange, there is innovation, there is creativity. You have all these things that have been really nice, but you actually have more of them because now we have sort of the free time and the equity and access to be able to take advantage of that. And that's why DeFi is going to be so revolutionary as a financial utility, but even more so Web3 as like a cultural utility for that new internet and that new economy.
Right, right. And just to kind of add on to that a little bit, and we've discussed this before, economic systems by their very nature are political systems. And that's especially true with capitalism. So these, neoliberalism and decentralized finance have political consequences. Decentralized finance has sort of a reversal of ownership, reversal of power back to the masses of people, whereas with capitalism, it's really concentrated in the hands of a few.
Yeah.
And, that's sort of been one of the dilemmas of capitalism is that you try to become more efficient and concentrate wealth. And as you do that, you take more people out of the middle class, and pretty soon you have a few people that own everything. And there's too many people, so everybody can't work for them. So you have to ask yourself the question, is there going to be social disruption? What happens to all the people? And I mean, we see that happening now. It's starting to happen in the United States. This has been happening around the world in other countries. Like you mentioned, South Korea. And they, I know in Japan it happens. In Japan too, they have these groups called koretsus. And what a koretsu is, they may have, a group of companies that work together. Like may have a bank here, and then they have an insurance company here. They have an auto manufacturer. They have a steel manufacturer. Korea does it too. They have koretsus. Hyundai is a huge company. Hyundai makes everything from cars. They make 40,000 ton stamping machines. They make garden equipment. They make medical equipment. And there's this group of companies that work together. Now, if you're heading up one of those companies or you're in the little clique, I mean, you probably make some money and you do okay. But if you're not, then you probably don't do okay. Because what they do is the nature of it is they need insurance, they buy insurance from their guy. Not a new startup business that not Alex's insurance company. They don't buy from you, they buy from their guy, which is the same guy. So they're like paying themselves. And the guy's in the middle. The guy's in the middle on the finance side of it. They like buy stuff from themselves. Now, how cool is that? Like you buy this money and it comes right back to you.
Well, it's actually kind of how the mob works, right? Every mob family, they've got an accountant, they've got lawyers, they've got real estate agents, right? They just do it. They keep it all in the family, right? And that's essentially how that's why they even think of them as families.
Right.
Yeah.
And see, what happens is then you have a middle class, and this is why you have so many people in so many countries that are so pissed off. Is because they're realizing now that, wow, I had a guy the other day, and he's probably in his late 70s. He said, man, I remember when I used to could take care of my wife with just my job, and we had a house and we had 2 cars. He said, you can't do that now. He said, with 2 people working, you're lucky if you have 1 car. And so what happens is the middle class is really, got the squeeze put on it, and they can't really afford, like the average price of a car now is $42,000. Now, a lot of people can't afford that, but many more can't. And eventually, what happens is that you get in a situation in a country, and this is happening in a lot of other countries, and this is one of the bad things about globalism, is because now the people in their country can't afford it, so they said we'll just sell it to Americans. Or General Motors says, well, the average guy can't afford to buy a Cadillac. Said, so what, man? There's plenty of Chinese. We'll sell them to the Chinese. They can take everyone we can manufacture, we can send over there. So what globalism does, it takes advantage of the working classes in various different countries. And I'm sure those countries do the same thing. There's probably not a lot of people um, in Japan that are buying a Lexus truck. But they say there's plenty of people in America that'll buy these. Just keep making them and shipping them. Let's get them over there.
Well, yeah, you see scarcity of some things, right? The problem is that
Mhm.
free market economics favors
Mhm.
profits over access, over human quality of life,
Right.
over affordability to everyone, right? So when you see economic class issues start forming, you see gaps continue to get bigger. You don't see companies move to make things more accessible to the people being left out. You see them changing their strategy to simply sell things that are more exclusive
Mhm.
or sell other things in great bulk that people don't want to buy.
Right.
You see like huge amounts of fast fashion, for example. You see H&M spitting out $10 shirts, right? Most people don't need $20, $10 shirts, right? Like, or 20 $10 shirts, but like they're just making it like that, right? They're just creating this surplus of nonsense.
Yeah.
And this is something that, a lot of political philosophers have actually predicted over time. And even MIT predicted in a lot of their projections from the 1970s. In the 1970s, they did these projections. It was one of the first computerized projections of the future. And they did tons of them. And almost all of them placed us at this awkward moment around 2040 where you're overproducing things you don't need and in the process destroying the planet while also seeing huge reduction in the ability for people to afford basic necessities, and also a reduction in things that we do need like food and other important resources.
Right.
And so you see this production of like nonsensical capital, or nonsensical product and it's pretty wild because it just that's where the design breaks down. You see this like poorly designed system because it's not in favor of the people who are the consumer. So when you have product that isn't in favor and you have design of the system that isn't in favor of the people who are the consumer, because they're also your worker and they no longer are your worker, they're just your consumer, but they're not getting income from anywhere and they're getting shit product. Well, now you're in like a really awkward position because you're just still centralizing well towards the top, but you're not producing anything worthwhile.
Right. And I think we probably got there a little sooner than 2040. But
We're ahead of schedule. Yeah.
Sometimes it's easy not to notice things around you, especially if you're doing okay. The gentleman said once that said, what's the difference between a recession and a depression? Well, a recession is when your neighbor's out of work. A depression is when you're out of work. So until it really affects you, you don't really notice things. And it creates social situations. That's like some countries are so poor. I was in Punta Cana, and I went to this mall. It's kind of it's behind a wall, and I'm walking through the mall, and I walk out front just to walk around, and I see these three guys with sawed-off shotguns. I'm like, what the hell? And I'm like, oh God, this is where I want to die. He says, no, those are the security guys.
So it protects you as the shopper who has the money to shop.
I said, well, why do they have sawed-off shotguns and they're hiding in the bushes? They say, well, because the people come over the wall to steal things and rob people and jump back over the wall and take off. And so I guess, and I was like, wow, and I said, so the driver said, he said, I'm going to take you through the city so you can actually see why the people jump over the wall. And I mean, it was a level of poverty that, you kind of see on TV and you hear about, but I've never seen in this country. I mean, it was, the dogs even looked like they were starving, the stray dog. I mean, it was pretty bad. So I said, wow, that is, and so that's the kind of society you end up with, where you got to have, your street, you got to have 5 or 6 guys with sawed-off shotguns, so you can go out front and water your grass. And
And
a lot of,
that's where you play the simulation out. You see it. I mean, literally behind me, they're building 5 new luxury buildings over here,
Mhm,
2 or 3 more over here.
mhm,
But the numbers show that people, regular people, average people, are moving out of Chicago neighborhoods to the surrounding. They're moving to like Indiana
mhm.
and Wisconsin because they can't even afford to live in the state of
Oh
Illinois
yeah,
around Chicago anymore.
yeah.
So they're going to drive 45 minutes into the city every day
Mhm.
to work because they can't actually afford to live here.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
who are we building this for? Who we're building this for are for the influx of international purchase of property. So what
Mhm.
you're seeing is a huge influx. Chicago last year was one of the number one cities in terms of migration out, but it was also the number one city in terms of
Mhm.
foreign investment. So what
Wow.
you see is, because obviously we're losing the coast. So
Mhm.
you're seeing, places like San Francisco, Miami, New York, these places over the next 50 years are in a lot of trouble in terms of like infrastructure, right?
Right.
And so here we are in the middle of the country in Chicago. We're next to fresh water. So
Mhm.
you've got rich people in China and Dubai who are like, we should buy some land next to the lake in the middle of the country. And so they're buying up properties here, and then they're just trying to, they're just sitting on it. It's another storage of wealth, right?
It is.
So we're building these luxury buildings for the rich,
Mhm.
people who they're not even going to live there.
It's an
There's not going to be
investment,
people
man.
in those.
It's like where's a better place to park your money, in Bitcoin
Right.
or real estate in Chicago? you know, and people park their money. There's no apartment in New York on Madison Avenue that's worth $50 million, but that's the market rate, and people park their money there. That's just like when you see these athletes, like who was it? Mark Wahlberg has got I forget the home's 80, 60 million, $80 million. And that's where you park your money. When you get a
Right.
big
It's a
chunk of money,
lockbox, right?
you park it
It's
there, and then somebody else will come along and say, hey, I know you paid 60 for it 3 years ago. I'll give you
right.
92. Then you take
Yeah.
your capital gain and your 92, and you go buy one for 100. And
Right.
you make a few payments for 3 or 4 years, and somebody says, "Oh, I tell you what, man, I know you paid 100. I'll give you 140 for it, right?" And so it's a place to park money, and
Yep.
and that's why you have a lot of foreign investors. Most of the real estate, and I don't know if this is still true, but I know last year most of the real estate sales in this country, for the first time, more of them went to investors. And you look at investors at all levels. You have people. I got a friend that flips houses. I mean, he'll buy these things for little or nothing. He'll put a
Yep.
little or nothing into them, and he makes a nice profit. But he
Yeah.
does the work itself, him and his 2 brothers, and he's an investor.
Yeah.
And then you have different investors at all levels. You have, what is it, Blackstone Group? Is that the group? Is it
Yeah, BlackRock. Well, you got
BlackRock?
BlackRock. There's
BlackRock.
BlackRock and Blackstone, right? But BlackRock is sort of the one that's been buying. They were buying residential homes, right?
Yeah, yeah, they are. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Entire streets. They were pricing actual buyers out. So you see
Right,
I mean, this is dystopian, right? And this is how it plays out. So when you talk about neoliberalism, it's essentially this conservative idea that like it'll magically work itself out when it's clearly not,
yeah.
mixed with like a liberal idea of like, well, we should do something about racism. And so they like let the inequitable economy continue to run its course, which was, to their dismay, designed inequitably based on marginalized and communities and socioeconomic issues, but they don't want to fix that. They just want to sort of
Mhm.
performatively say that they care about the social issues without doing anything about the underlying system that's broken.
Mhm. Yeah, and a lot of social problems. Anytime you have um, capitalism that reaches a point, where the middle class is kind of hanging on by a thread. You know, they always have somebody in every country. They have somebody to blame. It's never the system. They say, well, if you wouldn't have let these people in, or if these people would go to work, or it's always like well, the Germans blame the Jews, and if you go to France now, it's the North Africans, and every place has somebody to blame. And nobody is looking at the system and said, well, maybe this is just, what's that old saying? Don't hate the snoop, don't hate the player, hate the game, you know. And the game is rigged, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of people more so now are realizing it, because if you talk to somebody on a right wing extremist and a left wing extremist, they both say the same thing: the government's screwing us. The new world
Right.
order doesn't work, but
Yeah.
they blame different people for it, so
Right.
I think that's one of the neoliberal results of neoliberalism. Is that when you have this unrestricted global free market capitalism, there's a lot of collateral damage. And you can't. It's an unsustainable system that it only goes so far, and pretty soon, you won't need, with the advent of decentralized finance and artificial intelligence, well, you may not need as many attorneys. Maybe I can just, maybe Alex can just write me a smart contract with a computer that learns that has all the knowledge of every law book ever written, and I can say I need to defend this case and blah blah blah. Write me a brief, and it's okay. Stick $500 in the slot. Okay, here's your brief.
Well, I think more than that, it's like you have a reduction in need, right? You have a reduction in dispute. So,
Mhm.
like right now, the complexity of certain systems, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in how you settle real estate, I
Mhm.
mean, all of these relationships we have with people all the time, so much of those relationships are either left up to complex middlemen and like intermediaries
Right.
frameworks and things that aren't as super clear. They're not as efficient. They're hard to maintain clear records on, or like there's just no record at all, right? Like,
That's
oh,
right.
I had an agreement with my friend down the street and he was going to do my garage and now we're in people's court, right? Like, like we have all of these quote unquote smart contracts
Mhm.
that occur all the time with people around us, but there's no contractual agreement, let alone a transparent one that we
Mhm.
can go back to and say, this is how things shake out, right? And so if you
Right.
automate a lot of those relationships we have all the time with
Mhm.
our Uber drivers, with
Mhm.
the people that we settle mortgages with, the
Mhm.
people that we settle wills with, right? All these complexities about our lives that are left up to like broken and efficient systems to manage and settle,
Mhm.
all of those things can be, at least most of them, and
Mhm.
at least large chunks of them can be automated and then put on, into blockchain technology so that they're transparent, they're immutable, irrefutable, and most importantly, immediately settled. Right. So there's immediate liquidity, there's immediate settlement. And if there isn't, there's something listening and waiting to settle it.
Mhm.
So there's no question, there's nobody who has to like trust that it'll happen. It happens automatically based on the rules predefined by the contract. And
Mhm.
so imagine every paper contract that you had has code that runs when needs are fulfilled. And when those
Mhm.
needs are fulfilled, payment is already executed,
Mhm.
settlements already executed, right? Like all of memorializations already executed, the records immediately updated. You
Mhm.
don't ever have to trust somebody else to just do their job or
Right.
remember something
Yeah.
because it's already happened.
Mhm.
And that's sort of the key differentiator. And so even if the legal system will probably still need some form of like expertise or judge or like
Mhm.
human element, especially because when you think about that coded bias show that we watched,
Mhm.
um, the more that you automate things now, you do see like remnants of our biases as human beings,
Mhm.
like those prejudices end up they end up
In the
coded
code.
bias,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
the algorithms end up biased
Yeah.
because the algorithms can only learn from us. And if we're already biased and broken, so you do need some human element, the checks and balances. I think that isn't going away within 50 or 100 years necessarily, but we can definitely eliminate a lot of the complexity around that system where humans are more easily failing to do their job or be good
That's right.
people.
That's right. Yeah. And I think decentralized finance. Elon Musk. He issued a warning, and I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but he's a pretty smart guy. I mean, he used this. I think it's his college apartment, he turned into a nightclub so he could pay his rent, which is pretty, pretty clever. A pay party. It's not the first one that does it, but I mean, it's enterprising. And he said, with AI, uh, AI, artificial intelligence, smart contracts, machine learning, you know, all these things that you hear about. When you hear about them, the technology has gone beyond that. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of the technology, the cutting edge technology, is proprietary, so you may not hear about it. But he feels like in a few years there'll be millions and millions of people out of work. Um,
Yep.
I said, well, it's that way now in some countries, but because of automation, there'll be a lot of people. They won't need there won't be a need for a lot of people to do certain jobs. So it's just like 50, 80 years ago in this country, we had a lot of family farms. They were smaller. Now you've got these huge conglomerate farms. These huge farms, and all those families that were farming are now working in a factory or something. They were farmers, and you can make the case that, well, maybe a family farm was a better deal, because they may have had 40 pigs instead of 400,000, so you didn't have some of the issues you have with all the waste. So there's certain, I guess, instances or certain situations where it's better to have more people than less people do certain things, and not just for social causes, but it just has a much less of a cost on society. For instance, neoliberalism, unrestrained global free market capitalism. Pretty soon, we this is going to be in the healthcare industry. We see it now, and it's typically, you know, uh, most insurance companies go state by state, and then you have some that are national. And pretty soon, you're going to have an international healthcare company. And I
That's
think
what's happening. They're
yeah, that's
buying.
what's
I don't know if
happening.
you've read about this,
No, I
but the
haven't.
private healthcare companies
Mhm,
are behind the scenes buying up entire hospitals and healthcare companies.
mhm.
They're buying up the infrastructure in the public healthcare companies of Europe and Canada.
Wow.
So behind the scenes,
Huh.
because a lot of the regulators in these European countries have stake in these healthcare companies, so they've formed relationships because of the profit model.
Mhm,
And so things are going downhill, and people are blaming the public healthcare system, saying like, oh, this is why you shouldn't have public healthcare systems,
mhm.
when in reality the things that are breaking are because they're selling out the back end
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
to companies.
yeah. They
So
are.
they're
Yeah,
losing
yeah,
quality.
yeah, 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 yeah. And there's I read an interesting article a couple months ago about kidney dialysis, and there's like two or three companies that own all of them.
Mhm.
And this has issues beyond cost. What they set the cost at what they want to charge, because it's like, I know at one time in Detroit the same person owned all four Mercedes dealerships. So you left this one and you went to this one, and you thought you were getting a deal, and you said, I'll never go back to that one, but it was the same guy. And they play these games like, if they had certain vehicles they wanted to get rid of, they make them high at three stores and then real low at one store, and everybody would flock there. They get them out, then the next month they do the same thing at another dealership. You know, so the thing about
You
healthcare,
control
though,
the whole market. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, the thing about healthcare, though, is something that most people see as a fundamental right. But the way it is now, if you don't have good insurance or you don't have money, you're not going to get a certain level of care. I mean, that's just if I mean, that's just the way it is, and I don't think that's fair. But you have to. Healthcare is the most profitable business in this country. Well, healthcare and Apple, I think. Healthcare and Apple are the most profitable. And the thing about healthcare, if you don't have insurance, you don't have good insurance, or you don't have a lot of money, you don't get the same level of healthcare that somebody that does. If somebody asks me, says,
Yeah.
"Well, do you really think rich people live longer?" I says, "Hell yeah, they live longer. The stuff that kills you at 62, they go get fixed, and they're
Right.
still around at 92.
Yep.
And So that's just another, I guess, instance of neoliberalism and unrestrained, global free market capitalism, where it doesn't work to everybody's benefit.
Yeah.
And it
People
could
talk
be.
about the quality of our healthcare, right? They're like, well, if private healthcare is so bad, why does America have some of the best hospitals in the world?
Mhm.
Well, they're not measuring our bad hospitals, first of all. But second of all, it's because it's one thing to say that we have some hospitals and some great surgeons. We have wonderful things in
Mhm.
this country, only if you're able to afford it. If you're a Saudi
Right.
prince and you can come to the Cleveland Clinic for heart to get your heart looked at, well, that's super great. It isn't helpful to the person without insurance
Yeah.
who lives in East Cleveland and can't go there,
That's
right?
right. Yeah, they live 2 miles away and can't go there. That's
They
right.
don't even look at them. They
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
even let them in the door, right? Like the moment you walk into the ER, what's the first cart that comes around? The first cart that comes around before they give you anything is to make sure that you're going to be able to afford the situation,
That's
right?
right.
To make sure
Yeah.
you're able to afford everything they're about to do.
Sign
And if
in.
you can't,
That's right.
they're good luck. Like they're
They
going to
they
give you a
ask you
free
for
juice
money.
box.
They ask you for a credit card right now, even if you have a deductible. They ask you for a credit card while you're getting
Yep.
treated. You know.
I'll never forget. So I had my intake for my transplant. I had to go through the ER
Mhm.
because it was so late, and I still got charged the dang ER. They still took my credit card. I was like, no, this is my intake for my surgery. They're like, sorry, sir, we still got to charge the
They still
ER
gotta
admittance
charge you.
fee.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
was like, okay.
Yeah,
If I had gone
it's
during the day, I wouldn't have gotten hit with that.
I
But
know,
that's
man.
how the system works, right? These are private companies. So you can be so proud of the service we offer, but that's like saying we're proud of the service that, Bentley offers its
Mhm.
customers. Like, okay, cool. You get really nice service when you're a customer of a 7-star hotel
Mhm.
because you can afford it, right?
Right,
That's
right,
that
right.
doesn't set the baseline of quality of life. It doesn't mean
And
that,
it's and they say
every
Bentleys.
American has access to that.
Yeah, Bentleys are great cars. Well, of course they are, man. They cost
Yeah.
400, 500, $600,000. Of course they are.
Yeah, like if you measure something that's expensive as like something you're proud of, well,
Mm.
that doesn't mean that it's accessible, especially when you talk about something like healthcare. When you talk about something like dialysis,
Mhm.
where this is an even worse issue where companies that are offering a subpar product are controlling the market and preventing innovation from happening because they make so much money off of the existing thing. I mean, how many decades has dialysis been the only way to treat kidney failure, right?
Mhm.
For it hasn't changed. There hasn't been any change. There hasn't been innovation, and this is where the lies about capitalism break down. Of like, well, capitalism allows competition and it allows innovation, and this is a lie because when the companies get large enough, they can keep all of that out, or they can
That's right.
acquire,
That's right.
and then they prevent it from competing with the existing subpar
Well, look,
product they offer.
yeah, look at Facebook, man. They bought up everybody.
Right.
They bought, every company. They bought WhatsApp. Who else they own? Is it Instagram? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Meta.
Yeah.
And now they got Meta, so they bought everybody up. So they really do want to control the internet. They want it so when you go on the internet, you've got to ride past, you got to put a toll, man, and ride past the toll road.
Apple
And
bought an international credit company today.
hmm,
Apple's building cars, they're building glasses. They bought up a credit card or like a credit checking company today.
hmm,
So you already have like the Apple card, right? You have Apple Pay, you have all the devices based on Apple, right? The entire Apple ecosystem. My apartment looks like an Apple store.
oh, mine
And
too.
now they want to control the monetary exchange, all of your exchange. I mean, what do they
Yeah,
build anymore? You
yeah,
don't know what Apple is anymore because
there you
Apple is
go.
just sort of this seamless integration in every aspect of your life, right? Same thing with Facebook and Google, all of these, when your thermostat, when your smart home thing, when everything is connected to these ecosystems and it's all controlled by three companies, there's some serious ethical questions of like, did capitalism here create something truly great? Or like, are we just convincing ourselves in a neoliberalistic
Mhm.
way that like everything's fine, we're so proud of this, but it's creating major issues for the people that it doesn't work for.
Right. And Apple has the most successful retail stores in the history of mankind. You go to, and they've cut down on the stores. So, even in a city of three or 400,000 people, there may be 3 Apple stores. So
Mhm.
you go in an Apple store and there's a couple hundred people in there, and they geo track you, from the time, because they used to freak me out. You walk in the store and you tell them what you were there for. He says, well, somebody will come grab you, and you go in a crowd of 50 people or something, and they
They know
walk
where you
right
are.
up
Yeah.
to you and say, hey, Alex, I got your new phone. And I'm like, wait a minute, how'd you know I was here? And so they
Yeah.
geo track you, and it's pretty, I guess it's pretty efficient because they get you in and out. And I read once that the average person that walks in the Apple store spends north of, I think it was $600. That's, when you
Yeah, when you
average out
average it
everything,
out. Yeah.
the average is about $600 per person. So
Yep.
their whole thing is throughput. That's what they focus on, is throughput. How many people they can get in and out the fastest.
Yeah.
It's just like, in any manufacturing environment, the more parts you can get out of this machine within an hour, the more money you make. So what do? You turn it up so it'll go faster. And if the guy can't keep up, you just get a younger guy, you know. And so their main focus is on throughput
Yeah.
in Apple Store. So everything they can do to increase throughput, because they're going to get to $600, and they'll figure out a way to maybe bump it up to 620 or 625. But it's pretty crazy. But like you say, pretty soon you go to one company for everything. And the
Yep.
question I asked, well, what is the government? Where's the government in all this? What do they do?
The government, all of the regulators have stocks in these companies, right? This is, I mean, like a few months ago, the press was quizzing, or they were like pressing Nancy Pelosi on insider trading. I'll never forget this press conference. It was so funny. They're like, Nancy, do you think it's okay that your regulators, that other lawmakers are investing in companies that they are on committees to regulate? She was like, no, capitalism is for everybody. Like we all deserve it. This is democracy. And like it's true, because Nancy Pelosi's made a lot of money on investing in stocks, right? And who cares if they're on the inside of a regulating body that has
what
to
would you
keep
think?
these companies in check?
She's been in Congress for a long time. She didn't start out wealthy. She didn't start out wealthy.
No.
What
So
would
what
you
happened?
think? What do you think her net worth is?
Yeah, what is her?
120 million bucks. That's a pretty good return for somebody making 160 grand a year.
Yeah, it is 120 million.
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty good damn, and it's crazy because it's like everybody knows this. If you want to get rich, the quickest way is to get elected to Congress, because you get all the insider information, and you can borrow money. You can overdraw your account at the Capitol, and sometimes they make you, and they never hassle you about paying it back. So if you want to overdraw your account for a couple $100,000 to buy some Pfizer stock because you were at the meeting with Trump, and you know that we're getting ready to buy, if you want to get some Pfizer options, and you were at the meeting, go right ahead,
Right? Why not?
so I think, it's and that's when you have unrestrained global free market capitalism, this is the result of it. This is what you get.
Yeah.
And it's
Right.
good. Everybody likes to make money, likes to have money, nothing wrong with that. But I think it's having a detrimental effect on society, where everyone's not going to be able to keep up. So what do? You can, I guess, get with Bezos and Musk and go to the moon, or go to Mars and live, or what do you do?
Yeah, and that's why you see a lot of these regulators are so anti-crypto, and they feign this thing like, oh, it's because they want to protect the consumer from
Yeah, we're from the
fraud and blah blah
government.
blah.
You remember that commercial, the guys who knocked on the lady's door and they had on suits and briefcase, said, "Ma'am, we're from the government. We're here to help you." And she goes and gets a shotgun and locks the door. Just get the hell out of here,
Because you see, like people like Elizabeth Warren. I mean, they had a hearing last week where they brought in experts on, they were trying to decide how to regulate crypto so that Russian oligarchs can't misuse it to hide billions of dollars of funds. And so she proceeds to ask this expert questions, but before he can even answer, she's already interrupting him and correcting him about things that she's wrong about. And the question is she like genuinely really that ignorant of the subject, but very confident in her opinion? Or is this person who was bankrolled by banks, all of her campaigns prior to her recent presidential run, every single one, her biggest donors were finance.
Yeah, yeah.
All of them, finance industry. She's worth $12 million. And so
That's pretty
is this
good for a
public
college
servant,
professor. That's pretty
right?
good.
Yeah, this public servant who's worth $12 million, is she really anti-crypto because she doesn't understand it? And in which case you'd think that she would listen to the experts that they brought in, since they're experts. Or is there some other reason that she doesn't trust this new economic system, right? Perhaps because she can't benefit from it the same way in an inequitable way, maybe because she's equal to everybody else in that arena. I don't know. I don't know what the reason is, but I don't like the fact that you have people who claim to be progressive who are openly attacking progressive technology in lieu of their previous support of the broken banking system that's been predatory and inequitable for people, especially for the marginalized communities that they claim to want to represent and support.
Yeah, you have. I think you have. I don't know if there ever was a time where you had a lot of integrity. I think you had more integrity in the past. In public service, people actually went into public service, because they wanted to serve.
Yeah.
Even John Kennedy. John Kennedy um, was a very conservative person. People thinks that he was just flaming liberal. He was a pretty conservative guy. He got into office. He was supported by big money. He catered to big money, and that's part of the story that's never told. And they look at well, he did this and he did that. Yeah, he was forced to do a lot of things, that really wasn't on his plate to do. Uh, Probably the biggest mistake is when he told the Chicago mob, if you help me get elected, I'll lay off you. And then his brother Robert Kennedy went at him, and I, that may have been led to their premature demise. I'm not sure, but some people feel that it did. But here again, neoliberalism, and see, capitalism now, it used to be kind of restrained. People had some loyalty to the country they were from, but it's all global now. It's all global. Like somebody told me, says, well, the music we talk about, I've been involved in the music business in one way or another for a while, and people say, well, the music business is this, and you gotta make it in New York or Cali, and why would you even go to Russia and play a concert? It's just a waste of time. Well, the head guy in the music business that owns Warner Music Group is a Ukrainian Russian, that owns the Warner Music Group. And he pretty much, him and about two other guys, pretty much control the music business. It's global. It's a money thing. It's global, and people still think in terms of, you know, and you have a lot of them that say, well, buy American, buy this and buy that. Yeah, we want to buy American, but you guys have got to kind of like bring those companies back. All those companies that left, but you can buy something that's manufactured here, but the money doesn't stay here; it goes somewhere else. And I think one of the biggest challenges that maybe decentralized finance can address is healthcare. I mean, suppose you had a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, unlike a foundation that ran Cleveland Clinic or the Mayo Clinic.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And all the participants had a voice in how it was run, all the employees. And I think it might be a more fair system.
Right. Yeah.
'Cause I'll tell you another thing too. If you had to go to certain hospitals, and you've noticed too, you got some big time hospitals in Chicago. Certain hospitals, if you don't have insurance, they send you down the street to another hospital.
Yeah. They send you down the street to some Catholic owned.
Yeah, some charity.
You got nuns without any medical training taking a look,
Yeah. That's what they do, man. But if you got good insurance and you got some money and you need a transplant or something, you're able to write them a $300,000 check. And it's funny, like people. I noticed this about people with transplants. You can be on a transplant list for months and never get an organ. And somebody with money can be on there for 2 days. A lot of these pro athletes that have, I won't call any names, but in the past had drinking problems, had bad livers.
Yeah.
Well, they can go on the list Friday
Yep.
and Sunday morning, they're getting transplanted.
Right.
And that's because they have money and they have, they can benefit the hospital by saying, hey, we transplanted, the son of God or something.
These are the tough questions and tough things we've got to bring up with neoliberals, right? People, obviously, most people don't like identify as a neoliberal. They probably identify as
Progressive.
some more comfortable idea of a progressive. But when you ask them these questions, when you ask them, is it okay that billionaires exist and the baseline quality of life isn't there? Or is it okay that the healthcare system works this way? Or you ask them these hard questions. And if they're not able to answer it, that's awkward, right? Like, that's like, well, what do you actually want to change? Are you okay with this? Like, is this okay for you? And of course, for a lot of them, if they're comfortable, of course it's okay. They've never had to deal with it.
Yeah. And I think what happened, and things happen like in leaps and bounds. For instance, when you had Citizens United, where they said, corporations are people, and you can spend as much dark money as you want. That means that the wealthy people can pretty much buy any politician they want. That's what they do.
Yep.
And for those of you that think there's a big difference between Democrats and Republicans, there may be some differences socially, but they get money from the same guys.
Right. They're upholding the same system, benefiting from the same system.
They go to New York and visit with our friend, Jamie, and they get money from the same guy. They say the right thing.
And they're all friends with each other too. People don't realize they're all in the same social circle. They hang out every day.
They're all homies, man,
Yeah.
And the truth be told, there probably were a lot of Democrats that have been through Mar-a-Lago.
Yep.
I'll guarantee you. There's been a lot of them that have been down there slapping high fives.
Yep.
So, but that's the world we live in, and hopefully through addressing some of these issues and discussing them, bringing them up, and offering some alternatives, decentralized finance, worker co-ops is an alternative to the way things work now.
Yep.
Capitalism, like all economic systems, they run their course, and when they come to the end, they all end. It's just like we're all going to die someday. We like to think that we'll live forever, but you're not going to live forever. And an economic system is the same way. It's not going to live forever.
It's a cycle. We realize that things aren't going super well, and we reset it somehow. And you're either going to want to be early and understand these things now, like we've said in previous episodes. You're either going to be ahead of it and understand where it's going, or it's going to happen to you.
That's right.
And that's sort of your set of options. So it's good to start figuring it out now.
That people make things happen, watch what happens, and wonder what happened. You don't want to be in that last group. You want to be in the first group. You want to make things happen, and control your future. So, once again, like I said, Alex and I cover a lot of these subjects based on what people have asked about. And we try to enlighten people and bring some truth. I like to say truth because anything that we say, you're welcome to research it, because we've researched it before we say it, and we found it to be valid, and check out neoliberalism. Look up decentralized finance, and you'll be surprised at what you might find. Yeah. So, well, thank you once again. We thank you for your time. Unfortunately, ours is up, but please like us and follow us on YouTube, the DeFi Collective at gmail.com. And also we will be live streaming on Facebook. And you can also find us on Let's Talk Radio on YouTube, RADYO, or the DeFi Collective at Gmail. And please subscribe. That way you'll get all of our programs. And if there's something you want to hear about, let us know. The DeFi Collective at Gmail, email us and let us know. And if we can't, if we don't know and we can't find anything out about it, we'll get somebody on that can. But we feel that with the way things are moving forward, particularly in the economic system, we feel like we should make people aware of a lot of things that are going on, and that's what we try to do. So, yeah. Alex, any closing thoughts?
Nope.
Okay. Well, we'll see you next week, and thank you for your time. Have a great week.
Bye, guys.